football owner of ABT Plumbing, Electric, Heat and Air, once again with the show You Got This. Is a show of DIY do's and don'ts. And I've got Rosalie Brown zooming in from LA, and I am in lovely Auburn. And sorry about the echo, because I have been relegated to one of our spare rooms that has nothing in it other than our carpet to try to dampen the echo. But our new conference room, because we're in the process of building an office for our new hire. So yeah, it's been kind of a crazy last couple of weeks.
So let's talk about, I think it's exciting news. Can we talk about your new hire for a second?
Yeah, so we've, over the past 4 to 6 weeks, we actually hired 2 Scots. So it's kind of weird. So I'll lead in with the first Scott. So we hired Scott Costa, who some of you may know, his wife, Valerie, up in our area. She worked for the union for many, many years. And Scott worked for a company called Water Heaters Only, which is actually located in Grass Valley, but they don't do any work in Grass Valley. Their 2 markets are San Francisco and LA. And he worked for their business development sector in LA for many, many, many years. For I think it was like 7 years he worked for Water Heaters Only. And I've known him for quite some time. I've known his wife for even longer because of working with her at the union. And he was looking for something different just because he was tired of making the commute down to LA once a month to go talk to his vendors and people down there. So we brought him aboard, and he's been doing great. He's out meeting and greeting and kissing babies and shaking hands and doing the stuff that I did when I first started the company. So we're really happy to have him on board. And then just this week, we hired Scott Eagle, and he comes from, we hired him as a chief operating officer. He comes out of corporate world. He worked for, actually, back before he was an Air Force vet. Then he worked in the corporate world. He worked for Sony for quite some time, and then worked for Butler Heating and Air and Blue Mountain, 2 really large heating and air companies down in the Sacramento market, and worked in the heating and air industry for about 20 years, and more recently worked for a solar company. And that's where I hired him. I pulled him from the solar company. And that's why I'm losing my conference room, because we're putting him in that conference room and taking one of the rooms that are off to the corner. And that's what I'm in right now. That's why we're echoing. So yeah, we're really happy to have the 2 Scots aboard, and things are changing quickly and growing rapidly. And we brought Scott on to kind of help us with this growth that we've seen. We've seen some pretty stellar growth, and I'm good at building teams, but building processes has been a little hard. So brought a process guy on board. So anyway, a little professionalism and some corporate stuff. So it's exciting times.
It is. And it's funny because I grew up with a brother named Scott, and it's not the most common name in the world. And so as this process was unfurling and we hired the first Scott, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And then when you the second Scott, I was like, oh, okay, that's super rare. That's not an everyday name. So so you have the 2. So we have the 2 now, but it's exciting because one is focused on business development, and the other one is going to be helping us to manage the growth, right? So it'll be exciting. Yeah. And maybe you'll end up with a soundproof booth in the corner. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get a little recording studio and turn the broom closet into like a recording studio. And we put some foam up.
That is one thing I've realized. Yeah, we're probably going to need a studio because we should be doing more videos and stuff anyway. So yeah, and I know a company that I go out and visited once, and actually going out again at the end of this month to go visit again. That they literally have, I think it's probably about a 800 to 1,000 foot videos department, right? It's a good sized studio that they have just for video and podcasting. So I'm like, yeah, all right, we'll get there. Yeah.
Wow. I gotta work on a good microphone first, but you get your video set up. I can't find a good microphone, and I live in LA. What does that tell you? Right. It's crazy.
So it's been kind of kooky, and then so we had Scott Costa was out in Sun City yesterday in Lincoln doing a health and wellness and business kind of thing for the residents of Sun City. And we had a booth down there, and he was down there meeting and greeting people and giving away stuff and talking to people. And one of the things that people were really, really interested in was this water jetter that we have. It kind of scours the pipes with high pressure water, 3,000 psi. We're one of the only companies in Northern California to have this particular piece of equipment. It actually has a diesel tankless water heater on it. So it not only does it shoot out high pressure water, but it's not cold water. It's actually hot water. So it has the ability to dissolve fats and greases that typically coagulate inside of sewer lines and drain lines. And we can actually clear those out to the point where they're literally squeaky clean. We've done some experiments where we've gone in, and when you rub your finger on the pipe, it slips because of all the fogs, the grease, organics, or the fats, organics, and greases in there. And then when we jet it with the hot jet, your finger sticks. It kind of like it gets it so clean that it changes the whole dynamic of the pipe. It's not going to clog faster. It actually will clog slower because of the fact that you get rid of the grease that grabs a hold of stuff. And while we're jetting it, we also have a reservoir, a product that we use called Total C that we've got private labeled. And it's an enzyme product that is not just an enzyme. It also has a grease emulsifier. So not only does the bacteria break down the organics, but the emulsifier breaks the bonds of the grease so that it dissolves into its basic components and will run through the pipes. So it's a pretty great piece of equipment. It was basically the price when I bought it. It was the price of a decent Mercedes. It's what vehicles are going for now. It's a little cheaper than that, but I know we just had a truck delivered today, and it's a little shocking what I'm paying for vehicles these days. I think they've gone up $30,000 in the past 2 years for me, 2.5 years since COVID. So it's nuts. But yeah, so anyway, the hot jet is a pretty amazing piece of equipment. It does some great work, and we use it quite a bit. So yeah, that's my pitch on that.
I wanted to get that plug in because Scott is so enamored with that machine. And also, he also has really been promoting it a lot. And I guess people were really kind of excited at the show. And I thought, you know what, it's kind of a cool machine. And then that Total C that you put in the pipes afterwards actually smells good, which I'm always into that because I have this ongoing issue with my kitchen sink. I'm like, oh God, it always stinks. No matter what I do to clear it, it always stinks. And so I'm like, I need to get my hands on that.
It definitely takes the smell out, and it's got a citrus smell in it, which helps with the grease and other cleaning stuff. So it's pretty great. And so Scott's been doing excellent. And then I'm not sure where I was going to go.
We're going to pivot to something cool. We're going to pivot to. I thought it was fascinating for once. Bless, no offense intended. You were the producer this week. I did not do any research this week. You did. So.
We started going down the line of. We offer an electrical inspection and whole house electrical safety inspection. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole of figuring out how often people should do it and what the reasons why you should do it. And I kind of had a lot of ideas, but I wanted to get some kind of clarification and maybe some, third party kind of reinforcement on it. So I went down that rabbit hole and shared it with you and shared it with somebody else. And you're like, hey, let's do a show on this. So this isn't exactly DIY, but it does kind of dovetail into some DIY projects because one of the subjects on there is what happens after you do your own electrical work, right? Who's actually looking at it? So when should you have your electrical system inspected? It's one of those things where, should I have my plumbing or electrical system or my HVAC system looked at? Things break down, right? I mean, things don't last forever. And It's surprising how lackadaisical we can get with things inside of our home compared to our vehicles, right? If I've got a 10-year-old vehicle, I'm taking that thing in for service all the time. A 20-year-old vehicle, I know it's going to be in the shop all the time. I'm going to be doing all the maintenance on it to make sure that thing keeps running, right? 20-year-old systems inside of a house, we just like take for granted that they're still working, right? But the reality is, both in the plumbing and electrical and HVAC, but particularly in electrical, things do break down. We do have electricity running through those wires that, through expansion and contraction of materials and the actual electricity running through it, things actually move inside of there. Bonds will actually start to loosen. And then all of a sudden you start having arcing and you have all these kind of issues. And it's just from normal use. It's not, anything bad. It just happens, right? And then there's other things where products that we installed maybe 40 years ago were state of the art at the time. And now all of a sudden we realize, no, those are really bad. Those are actually dangerous. Like the Zinsco panels, where we realized, the aluminum bus bar that they used to save money on manufacturing was really not a good idea. It heats up and, the material expands and contracts, and the gap on the conductors increases. The bond that we have, how should I say it? When we push the screw down to tighten on the connector, things kind of move around and it gets loose, and all of a sudden the electrons start jumping through air, and that's little lightning bolts. They're really hot and they start arcing and they start causing heat issues, and then eventually they start causing fires. So, they were a good product when we installed them 40 years ago. At least we thought they were. But now we've realized, no, they're not. And there were some lawsuits against them, and that's long gone. All that money's been utilized. But anyway, so when should you have your house inspected? If you have a house that's over 20 years old, you should really be getting your electrical system inspected every 3 to 5 years minimum, ideally every year. And the reason being is, we're talking about electrons. We're talking about sparks. We're talking about arcing. We're talking about little lightning bolts that cause fires. And it happens more often than we think, more often than you would think. I know of just firsthand knowledge of 2 fires in our community that were started from a Zinsco panel. Then the houses were not completely destroyed, but close to it, right? So, and that's just firsthand knowledge. And I know there's been plenty others as well. And some of them go without being even registered, not even listed as that being the cause, just AKA otherwise known as electrical fire, right? So it does happen quite often. So how often should you have your electrical system? It's 20 years old. You should really have it every 3 to 5 years, ideally every year. And who should be doing that? A licensed electrician. Somebody that actually knows what to look for. They should be checking the panel, make sure there's no arcing, make sure all the connections are tight, make sure the wire isn't moved and done something weird, make sure the products that were used are of code today. And some people get kind of, the prickly when you say code, but building codes, their prime purpose, their prime reasoning is to protect person and property. It's the only reason we have codes is to make sure we protect persons and property. So, I know people don't like Big Brother looking down on you and whatnot, but really they're not there to hurt you. They're there to make sure that we stay safe. So every 3 to 5 years.
Well, also the code, if you don't end up staying in your home, if you go to sell your home, it's a big deal if things aren't up to code. You have to take that into account when you sell your house. If things aren't up to code, you could have some issues there, whether it's reduction on price or getting that resolved before, there's some additional problems with ignoring code, not just safety. But primarily that does happen when you get the deductions in the price of the house and stuff. It's because they were installed in an unsafe manner, in an unworkmanship type of manner. And that is all that code really is, right? Sure.
Whether you have something inspected or not, at least hopefully you've done it to the bare minimum, which is code.
Yep.
So when are some of the other times that you should consider having an inspection? So before any major home upgrades, so if you're going to be doing an addition, if you're going to be doing any kind of remodeling or anything like that within your home, and that's literally just, a new kitchen or something, you should have an electrician inspect the other wiring. Don't just have them come in and put the new circuits in. Have them make sure to look at everything as a whole. It's a system. When you go to the doctor, if you have a broken leg, they check your blood pressure and they check your weight. Why do they check your blood pressure? Because it's a system. You could be having reactions to something that have nothing to do with, it may just be a symptom of something, but the core issue may be high blood pressure, right? The same thing goes with electrical. You may add a new circuit, but there's an underlying condition that needed to be addressed, but unfortunately no one paid for it or no one brought it to your attention that needed to be solved. And unfortunately, that's another problem with most technicians is we're taught to fix things. We're not taught to communicate and tell people things that we see because we're afraid that people are going to get mad. We train our guys to make sure to bring up things. If they see something, you are the professional, you need to bring it to their attention and let the client decide what they want to do. At least they know. Yep. But unfortunately, we've been taught to not say anything because we don't want to get in trouble. So anytime you're doing a major home upgrade, remodel, or something like that, have an electrician go through the system and make sure things are done in a workmanlike manner and done to code. Here's where I was kind of leading into the DIY thing, because it's number 2. When should you have it inspected? If you've done some electrical work yourself, or one of your buddies came over and you shared some pizza and some beer and did some electrical work, have an electrician take a look at it, make sure it's done correctly. You can have all the best intentions and you think you're doing it right because you watched a couple of YouTube videos, and then the electrician comes out and like, oh my God, you're going to literally cause a fire. I've seen it. I've seen people do some installations where they thought they did a great job and they looked like, from everything they saw on YouTube, they really knew what they're doing. And nope, it was, potentially going to cause a fire. So electrical is one of those things where it's like, I'm a licensed electrician, and even since I don't work in the field on a daily basis, I have somebody else do my electrical. If it's beyond putting in a fixture or an outlet, I'm having somebody else take care of it for me because they deal with it on a daily basis. Like I've got somebody at my house right now running a new panel, a new sub panel, because I can do it, but he does it on a daily basis, and things change. But in any event. So if you have done any DIY stuff in your house, you should really have a licensed electrician come and look at it. And he may have nothing to say other than, wow, great job, or
oops,
let's fix it. This is another really big one. If you live in an older home, there are a lot of older homes in our area. And what are we talking about? 25 years or older. We're not talking about just Victorians, but we have a lot of Victorians in our area. We have a lot of homes that were built during the turn of the century. That, when electricity first came to the market in that era, we were using literally wire covered in cloth. They were basically covered in Levi's, right? It's an organic material that, guess what? A lot of creatures like to eat. Mice like to eat cotton insulation. I've seen mice get arced on wires when they're eating cotton insulation. I saw a lot of it in San Francisco. And actually, my dad actually had a buddy of his was repiping a house, and they had tube and knob. This is back in the 60s, though. Tube and knob wiring, and he was pushing some copper pipe by himself, and he electrocuted himself and died in the attic. And they didn't know about it. He was working by himself, and they figured it out for like a couple of weeks. So anyway, that old knob and tube cotton insulation is bad. We need to get that stuff out of there. It was good when they installed it, because that's all they knew at the time, but let's get rid of it. So if you live in an older house, it's 25 years or older, and especially if you live in a historic home, if that house hasn't been completely rewired and all the old knob and tube hasn't been removed, you should do that. It's not safe. Looking at time, what's another time you want to have inspected is if you didn't get a proper inspection before buying the house. And I'll be honest, a proper inspection does not mean a home inspector. A home inspector will come in and inspect your home, but if you look at any of those findings that the home inspector says, that he may have seen something right underneath it, there'll be a little CYA clause. have a licensed contractor look, have a licensed plumber, have a licensed electrician, have a licensed HVAC technician look at the work that was done. And they may say it's passed, but have it looked at. And who does that, right? Not many people call an electrician to come and look at it. And it may have actually been brought to your attention, but the home inspector is probably like, it's probably okay. But a home inspection is, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And most of the home inspectors I know were never contractors. They just became a home inspector and were trained to look for specific items. They were never an electrician. They were never a plumber. They were never a carpenter. They were never any of the actual trades. So even though you had a home inspection and you just bought a house, you might want to have somebody come out and take a look at it just to make sure that it's safe. It doesn't hurt. And, you may get some bad news, but hopefully you don't, and everything's good. And let's be honest, if you do get the bad news, better knowing about it and deciding what you want to do about it than leaving it and finding out that, there's an issue that could be potentially dangerous or could potentially deadly. Another time after storm damage, this year was a big year for falling limbs, right? Wasn't one of our huger ones, but it was a big one. So severe weather events can cause permanent damage to your electrical system. Wires come down, or limbs come down. Water infiltrates things. And unfortunately, water can infiltrate areas that you may not even see. I mean, let's be honest, I haven't climbed underneath my house in years. I've got people that I send underneath my house every year to check things. But if you don't have that person to do that, when was the last time you actually crawled underneath your house and inspected the electrical, make sure there's no water damage and make sure there's no damage to the electrical system? Probably never, or maybe 5 years ago, right? That's what we do. We make sure that everything is done properly. So it's not a bad idea after this year, if you've experienced any kind of damage whatsoever, have a thorough inspection done by an electrician. And we've got time for maybe one more. If you have sudden or reoccurring problems, if you have lights that are flickering every once in a while, an outlet that's flickering every once in a while, that's probably a loose connection somewhere in there. A loose connection is bad. A loose connection equals little lightning bolts. It's arcing. It's electrons jumping from one area to another. It's scary. So definitely have an electrician come out and determine where that problem may be. So, and anyway, that's the majority of them. So with that, so this is kind of a plug for us, obviously, but also kind of a PSA. But we do these inspections, and we do them at a very reasonable rate so that, you're not going, oh my God, it's going to cost me so much money. We're doing them for $49. So we can have a license, have our electrician come out and thoroughly inspect your system and make sure everything's working for only $49. Hopefully you find nothing. If he does find something, he will let you know. He or she will let you know. And then allow you to determine whether or not it's something you want to take care of. No one is ever going to force you to do something that you don't want to do. We are just there to give you information, and it's up to you as a homeowner to decide whether it's in the budget or whether it's a big enough concern for you to want to take care of it right away. So again, for $49, we can come out and do this inspection and, take care of it and get you through this. Where to reach us? 530-230-9092. That number again, 530-230-9092. You can also find us at abtplumbing.com or easyasABT.com. Find us on Facebook, like our page, please. We've got a lot of this information that we share all the time. And with that, thanks for listening to me go on about electrical and hot jet and all that other fun stuff. And we'll catch you guys next week. Hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks. Bye.